Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jodi Sanderholm. Jodi Sanderholm was born on September 26, 1987, in Arkansas City, Arkansas, to Brian and Cindy Sanderholm. She has two siblings, an older brother named Jason and an older sister named Jennifer, and is the third child in the family. From an early age, Jodi developed a passion for dance and excelled academically. She graduated as one of 4 valedictorians in her high school class. In high school, Jodi's academic achievements included membership in the National Honor Society and recognition as a Kansas State Scholar and a Kansas Board of Regents Scholar. She also received the David Steinamitzy Outstanding Physics Student of the Year Award. In addition to her academic pursuits, Jodi was an active member of the Ark City dance team for 4 years, serving as captain for 2 years. After graduating, Jodi attended Cowley College, where she studied pre-med and was a member of the Cowley Tigerette dance team. In 2007, Arkansas City had a population of approximately 12,000. Many residents, including Jodi's parents, considered it a safe and suitable place to live and raise children. On the morning of January 5, 2007, Jodi drove to the college to attend dance practice that was scheduled to end at 10:45. She planned to return home afterward. However, when her mother, Cindy, tried to contact her on her cell phone several times after practice, Jodi did not answer. This was out of character for Jodi, who usually kept in touch with her family and answered the phone promptly. As a result, Cindy's anxiety increased and she left work early to go home and check on Jodi. When Cindy arrived home, she immediately noticed that her daughter's car was not in front of the house, which made her even more worried because she knew that Jodi should have returned from practice by now. Upon entering the house and looking around, Cindy realized that Jodi had not returned. However, Jodi's dance uniform was nowhere to be found. It was not in the washing machine or the dirty clothes hamper, although she usually washed it after practice. The bathroom was dry, which was unusual because Jodi always showered after dance class. Further investigation revealed that Jodi had not contacted her father or sister Jennifer as planned. She had an appointment at noon but did not show up. Her parents Cindy and Brian attempted to call Jodi's friends to see if they had any information about her whereabouts, but their efforts were unsuccessful. None of her friends had seen her after her morning practice at the university. That evening, the college dance team was scheduled to perform at a basketball game with a routine choreographed by Jodi. But Jodi did not show up. When her parents, Cindy and Brian, were unable to reach her by 6 p.m., they decided to report her missing to the police. The sheriff's office quickly created posters with Jodi's description, began investigating her last known location, and issued a comprehensive bulletin about the car she was traveling in. Police discovered that Jodi had a boyfriend, Colby Wilson, whom she had been dating since high school. Cindy and Brian provided this information. Police contacted Colby by phone, and he explained that he had been visiting his brother in Texas for a few days. After verifying his alibi and confirming that he was in another state, the police eliminated him as a potential suspect. On January 6th, the investigation took a new turn. Lori Leglider, Jodi's longtime friend and dance partner from high school, shared key details with police. Lori and Jodi both attended Cowley College, pursuing dance together. Lori reported that she left work at the Sirloin Stockade in Arkansas City around 10 p.m. on Tuesday, January 2nd, and saw a light blue car drive by the restaurant several times. As she left on her way home, she saw a car following her in her rearview mirror. Lori suspected something was wrong and decided to check to see if the car behind her was really following her, so she turned onto several different streets. However, the driver continued to follow her. Much to Lori's horror, she drove to the local police station and parked nearby, and hoped that the proximity to the police would deter the person from further harassing her. After stopping, she no longer saw the suspicious car and felt safer, so she headed home. However, when she saw the car again, Lori returned to the parking lot near the police station. This time, she waited in her car for a while before deciding to drive home. She later confessed to the police that she had the opportunity to report the incident to the police but hesitated, initially thinking that it might be someone else's silly prank. But it turned out not to be the case. On Friday, January 5th, the Tigerette dance group, which included Lori and Jodi, was practicing at the university. As usual, Lori and Jodi arrived at the same time and parked their cars close to each other. Lori saw the light blue car again. Moreover, she recognized the man behind the wheel. It was a local resident, Justin Thurber, 23. Lori did not know him but had seen him several times with his brother and friends. Lori and Jodi left practice at the same time and planned to meet up later, but Jodi never showed up to the meeting. Soon after, several members of the dance team revealed that they had also seen Justin near the university over the past week. He had been sitting in his car in the parking lot, just watching. In the 24 hours after Jodi went missing, police conducted a thorough search of the city but were unable to find her car. The fields and wooded areas around Arkansas City made the search difficult. To aid in the search, a plane was brought in to scan the area from above. Police believed they had a chance to spot the car from the air. It was discovered that Jodi's cell phone had last pinged from a cell tower near the Call Wildlife Refuge, a large wooded area along the Arkansas River. At this point in the investigation, Justin Thurber was identified as a person of potential interest in Jodi's disappearance, according to information from Lori Legliner and other members of the dance group. It is important to note that despite his young age, Justin was already known to the police. 3 years earlier, in 2004, he had faced charges of possession of a controlled substance. Despite being on probation, he had not stayed out of trouble. Justin was arrested in October 2005 for theft and violating his probation. 3 months later, he was charged with disorderly conduct. Just 6 days before Jodi went missing on December 31, 2006, Justin was arrested for petty theft and found in possession of narcotics. After posting $3,000 bail, he was released on New Year's Eve. However, he quickly returned to his old ways and on January 1, 2007, he impersonated a police officer and caused a public nuisance. The police came to arrest him, but Justin was instead taken to the hospital after complaining of chest pains. It is unclear why he was not arrested after being released from the hospital. One possible reason is that he has a relative who works for the Cowley County Police, but this is only speculation. On January 6, a police officer spotted Justin's light blue Cadillac parked outside his parents' home. The officer decided to speak with Justin and was invited inside by Justin's father. When asked about his whereabouts the previous day, Justin explained that he had driven to Winfield, a town 13 miles from Arkansas City, in the morning. There, he met a friend and 2 acquaintances of that friend, whom he did not know well. Justin claimed that the 4 of them drove around the countryside in one of the acquaintances' cars until it got stuck on a dirt road near Cedar Vale. Justin then allegedly walked 30 miles to Arkansas City but stopped after 6 hours due to fatigue. He called his father to pick him up, which his father confirmed, saying that he found Justin wet and dirty a few miles from Cali State Fishing Lake. Justin also told the police that his car, which had been left in Winfield, had been returned to him by friends. The police found Justin's story unconvincing but lacked enough evidence to charge him. So they left without taking further action. That evening, the police spoke with Alexis Schwartzel, who had just broken up with Justin after 3 years of dating. They asked her about the places she and Justin had been, and she specifically mentioned the Cole Wildlife Refuge in southeast Arkansas City. The police told Alexis that they were investigating the disappearance of Jodi Sanderholm, to which she expressed great surprise. During the conversation, Alexis revealed a disturbing fact about Justin. She said that Justin had told her that he had started stalking Jodi when she was 13 years old. He would often peek at Jodi while she was swimming in the backyard pool. On some evenings, he even lurked outside her window, waiting for her to change her clothes. Alexis told police that she had broken up with Justin because of his abusive behavior, which had become increasingly disturbing. Specifically, she reported that during intimate moments, he would choke her to the point of unconsciousness. Furthermore, he had asked her to hit him, as this was the only way he could get aroused. As the investigation continued, police increasingly suspected that Justin might be involved in Jodi's disappearance, despite the lack of concrete evidence. However, on the evening of January 6, Officer Eric Mata arrested Justin on charges unrelated to Jodi's disappearance, revocation of bail and suspicion of criminal trespass. This decision was made after it was discovered that Justin had been on university property, where police believed he should not have been. Justin asked to speak with his attorney while police arrived at his parents' home with a search warrant. When they arrived, they took Justin's shoes that he had worn the day before when his father picked him up. The shoes were still wet and were drying on a towel. Justin's father told police that he had helped his son clean the mud off the shoes. Police also found the clothes Justin had been wearing at the time but could not use them as evidence because he had washed them. The next day, January 7th, searchers trained to identify human activity in rough terrain began their work at the Cole Wildlife Refuge. They found a shoe print that matched Justin's along with several smaller shoe prints in the area. However, as it got dark, they decided to call off the search and resume the next day. Some searchers on their way home passed the Cowley County fishing pond and stopped to investigate after learning that Justin was wet when his father picked him up. Their search led them to muddy tire tracks and shoe prints near a public restroom. They discovered a letter addressed to Jodi's parents in a chemical restroom, dance shoes in another, and a pair of flip-flops. Police found several items, including Jodi's driver's license and social security card in her purse, her black jumpsuit, and a tigerette jacket with her name on the front. They also discovered cut-off athletic shorts, a car floor mat, a car seat cushion, and a pair of sandals that matched the footprints found at the Cole Wildlife Sanctuary. After conducting a 2-day search around Cowley County Fishing Lake and the Cole Wildlife Sanctuary, experts with sonar equipment were brought in to survey the lake bottom. On January 9th, they discovered Jodi's submerged car. Unfortunately, on the same day, Jodi's body was also found at the Cole Wildlife Sanctuary, hidden under a pile of leaves, logs, and branches and without any clothing. Authorities discovered DNA evidence that linked Justin to both Jodi's car and her body. Initially, police were concerned that water in the car would destroy any evidence, making the search more difficult. However, forensic experts eventually discovered a short hair in the car. Terry Melton, director of the Forensic DNA Laboratory, conducted a DNA test on the hair found on Jodi's driver's seat and concluded that it was definitely Justin's. Barbara Leal, an employee of a private DNA testing company, tested samples taken from Jodi's right bicep and right breast. She concluded that Justin could not be excluded from the list of participants. Although 99% of the population could be excluded. Investigations using cell tower data showed that Jodi's phone and Justin's phone were in close proximity to each other on the day Jodi went missing. This finding was confirmed by Jodi's best friend, Lori Leglider, who claimed to have seen Justin in the university parking lot that day. Further evidence from the university's security camera footage supported Lori's story. The footage showed Justin in the parking lot at the same time as Jodi's practice and leaving at the same time as her. Furthermore, the footage showed Justin following Jodi in his light blue Cadillac. Additional evidence included letters addressed to Jodi's parents, which were later found near the lake. Police suspect that Justin followed Jodi home from a university and attacked her while she went to get the mail. He then pushed her into her car and drove away. A key piece of evidence supporting this theory was the discovery of shoe prints next to Jodi's family mailbox that matched the soles of Justin's sneakers. In addition, police found footprints at the Cole Wildlife Refuge that matched Justin's shoes, as well as smaller shoe prints that were later identified as Jodi's. Along the shore of the fishing lake, they discovered Jodi's shoes and other belongings. Further analysis of the footprints in the reserve revealed that Justin and Jodi's footprints were initially side by side, indicating that they had been walking together. However, at a certain point, Jodi's footprints stopped, while Justin's continued deeper into the woods, indicating that he had been carrying her. Justin's footprints eventually led to the location where Jodi's body was found. Justin claimed to have been with 3 people on the day Jodi went missing, but when questioned, they all denied seeing him. This meant that Justin's story about his car getting stuck near Cedar Vale was a lie. To investigate further, the police took Justin to Cedar Vale, but he was unable to find the location where he claimed his car got stuck. Upon returning to the police station, Justin surprised the officers by agreeing to take a polygraph test. He also requested that his relative, Chad Monroe, an employee of the Cowley County Sheriff's Office, be present during questioning. The evidence gathered was enough for a grand jury to indict Justin, despite his claim of innocence. The judge set Justin's bail at $1 million. His defense team attempted to argue that he was mentally incompetent to stand trial, but they were unsuccessful in their efforts. Because Justin had a high school diploma and several college degrees. During the trial, the medical examiner who performed Jodi's autopsy testified about the severe injuries she suffered. Based on the results of the autopsy, the medical examiner confirmed that Jodi's final hours were extremely painful. She had bruises and abrasions all over her body and face, and the cause of her death was strangulation. The severity of the violent injuries Jodi suffered was terrifying, showing the brutality of Justin's crimes. It can be said that Justin's actions were motivated by a sick desire. And he used a stick to commit the heinous crime at the Cole Wildlife Refuge. At the trial, 7 women, including Justin's ex-girlfriend, testified against him. They all claimed to have been stalked by Justin. One of the women worked with him and had a particularly terrifying experience. After seeing Justin waiting for her in the parking lot after work, she was too scared to walk alone to her car in the dark. As a result, she had to call the police to take her to her car. Prior to this incident, he had left a romantic gesture of a rose and a note in her car, expressing his interest in getting to know her better. In regards to Jodi's disappearance, several witnesses reported seeing her car on January 5, 2007. Carrie Morris, a friend of Jodi's, saw Jodi that day in Arkansas City. Around noon, Carrie walked by Jodi's car and saw Jodi sitting in the passenger seat. The man driving the car appeared to be a large man. Carrie attempted to contact Jodi on her cell phone but received no response. 2 witnesses reported seeing a vehicle similar to Jodi's on a dirt road south of Arkansas City at approximately 3 p.m. One of the witnesses identified the driver as Justin. After a trial, the jury returned the unanimous verdict on February 17, 2009, finding Justin Thurbert guilty on all charges and recommending the death penalty. Anticipating a harsh sentence, Justin's attorney attempted to negotiate a plea bargain. The proposal included Justin pleading guilty in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. However, Jodi's family objected to the deal. Ultimately, the judge reviewed the jury's decision and sentenced Justin to death by lethal injection in March 2009. In 2008, the state of Kansas signed the Jodi Act, which included provisions that expanded police powers over stalking suspects and expanded the list of behaviors that could be considered stalking. After his sentencing, Justin Thurbert continued to appeal the court's decision through his attorneys. One of their arguments was that Justin was mentally incompetent. In 2018, the Kansas Supreme Court stayed Thurber's death sentence, citing a U.S. Supreme Court ruling regarding executions. In August 2021, the Kansas Supreme Court rejected Justin's appeal of his death sentence, leaving Justin Thurber's death sentence in place. Notably, no one has been executed since Kansas reinstated the death penalty in 1994. The last time someone was executed in Kansas was in 1965. Since then, 9 other people besides Justin have been sentenced to death, but none have been executed. The Kansas Department of Corrections says it has not executed anyone in a long time and currently has no timeline for any future executions. So even if Justin's death sentence is upheld, the likelihood of it being carried out is very low. Jennifer Aldridge, the sister of a victim, said it was surprising that Kansas reinstated the death penalty more than 20 years ago but still has no concrete plan for executions. She hopes that discussions about the issue will take place when the death penalty is reinstated. Justin Thurber, 39, is currently incarcerated at the maximum security El Dorado Correctional Facility in Butler County, Kansas. The cost of keeping a death row inmate on death row is enormous, with an annual price tag of nearly $49,000 per inmate in administrative segregation at El Dorado. In addition, taxpayers pay higher costs when prosecutors seek the death penalty. The cost to prosecute a death penalty case is about $395,000, compared to $100,000 without the death penalty. Jodi's family continues to face hardship and frustration as they wait for justice for their daughter, Jodi. The situation is made worse by taxes, which they feel only add to their pain. Family members expressed feelings of helplessness and anger as they watched their tax dollars being used to support the person responsible for their daughter's death. Brian Sanderholm, Jodi's father, expressed his anguish at seeing his wages being garnished for taxes, knowing that some of that money was being used to fund the perpetrator's existence. Brian believes that the law should be enforced and that perpetrators deserve to be punished for their actions. Cindy posed a poignant question: if this happened to your child, what would you want to happen? Before she passed away unexpectedly on December 2, 2022, at the age of 63. The family's ongoing fight for justice is now made all the more bitter without Cindy's presence. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Tara Baker. Tara Louise Baker was born on January 20, 1977, in East Point, Georgia. Her parents got divorced when she was a child, and her mother later married again. Tara had 2 younger brothers and a younger sister, making her the eldest of 4 siblings. From an early age, Tara showed a strong interest in the law and aspired to be a lawyer or judge. She demonstrated this by conducting mock trials with her stuffed animals, creating contracts with family members, and she also writing letters to politicians. She even wrote to the President of the United States once to complain about his speech interrupting her favorite TV show. After graduating from high school, Tara attended Georgia College, where she earned 2 bachelor's degrees in just 3 years, graduating early. She then enrolled at the University of Georgia in 1999 to pursue further education. The university, located in Athens, was one of the top law schools in the country and was conveniently close to her parents' home. Just a few hours away. Because not wanting to live in a dorm again, Tara opted for off-campus housing. She rented a room in a house that was divided into 3 separate rooms, sharing the space with 2 other university students, one of whom was a familiar face from her college days. Tara was employed at a respected law firm in downtown Athens, which enabled her to pay her living expenses and gain valuable work experience in her chosen field. In January 2001, at the age of 23 and in her second year of studies, Tara spent a significant amount of time at the university library. The evening of January 18th followed this pattern. She and a friend went to the library, where they studied for several hours. Around 7:30 p.m., her friend left for home, but Tara chose to stay longer. At about 9:46 p.m., Tara called her friend to check that she had arrived home safely and mentioned her intention to leave the library in a few minutes. The next day, Virginia Baker, Tara's mother, got a phone call. The caller claimed to be a detective and asked if Tara had ever been arrested, explaining they needed her fingerprints. Virginia initially thought it was a prank call and hung up. But then she called the Athens police station to verify. They confirmed the caller was a real detective and told her there had been a fire at Tara's house. Virginia, still confused, asked to speak to Tara. The detective said they couldn't locate her and had found an unidentified body in the house, which is why they needed Tara's fingerprints. At the crime scene, investigators searched for evidence, but the room was badly damaged from the fire and water. It was later discovered that some items that survived the fire were not checked for fingerprints. Tara's laptop was missing from her room, which was unusual since it was a bulky item and other valuables were left untouched. This raised suspicions that the motive might not have been a robbery gone wrong. With no signs of forced entry, investigators suspected that Tara may have known her killer and let them in. The detective provided more information, stating that only one of Tara's roommates had been located so far, and that person was not at home when the fire occurred. However, the other roommate and Tara herself remained unaccounted for, leading investigators to suspect that the unidentified body might be one of them. When Virginia asked the detective to describe the room where the body was discovered, the response left her stunned. The detective explained that the room was packed with antique items, which was consistent with Tara's long-standing hobby of collecting such things. Tara's family rushed to Athens, hoping that the situation was a misunderstanding and that Tara was safe. Upon arrival at the police station, they were left waiting for hours without receiving any updates. Eventually, a detective met with them and delivered devastating news. The body found in the house was Tara's, and she had been murdered, not a victim of the fire. The detective, claiming exhaustion, declined to answer their questions at that time. However, before departing, he revealed that Tara had unknowingly left behind a crucial piece of evidence, fragments of the perpetrator's skin under her fingernails, which could potentially aid in identifying the killer. Tara's relatives were shocked and devastated by the news of her murder. The police refused to provide them with more information, despite their repeated pleas. Desperate for answers, the family made multiple attempts to contact the police, but were continually rebuffed. In fact, the police department never reached out to the family on their own, forcing Tara's relatives to repeatedly call and visit the station to gather scraps of information. Over time, they were able to slowly piece together some details of what had occurred. Tara's family discovered that firefighters may have inadvertently destroyed crucial evidence while extinguishing the blaze, a common occurrence in such situations. The firefighters' primary objective was to put out the fire and potentially rescue survivors, unaware that a murder victim was inside. Furthermore, the investigators failed to secure the crime scene after finding the body, allowing unauthorized access to the area. As Tara's relatives sought information, they faced resistance from the police, who were unwilling to keep them informed about the investigation. The family was also subjected to rudeness and unprofessional behavior from the authorities. In an effort to document their interactions, they began recording conversations with the police and filed complaints against local investigators, but this did not yield any results. The family decided to investigate Tara's death on their own and enlisted the help of a well-known criminologist. However, the local police department would only share case materials with him if he agreed to keep all information and findings confidential, even from Tara's family. For 10 years, the family was unable to obtain Tara's death certificate. They finally received it after writing to the state governor. But the certificate did not provide a detailed cause of death, only stating multiple injuries. Determining the exact time of death was difficult. Medical experts estimated it to be between 10 p.m., when Tara left the library, and 11 a.m., when neighbors called the fire department. However, it is likely that the crime occurred closer to the morning hours, as the fire did not take long to spread. The police investigation found witnesses who reported seeing a middle-aged white man running down the street on the morning of the murder. He was only wearing a t-shirt and jeans, which was unusual given the winter weather. Additionally, the police discovered that a few days before the murder, a man who sounded heavily intoxicated called Tara's university and asked for her phone number. The university had a phone number that students and faculty could call to request student information, such as phone numbers. The intoxicated-sounding man was only able to write down Tara's phone number correctly on his 8th attempt. The investigation into Tara's murder raised several suspicions, but the identity of the man involved remained unknown. At the time of her death, Tara was in a relationship with a boyfriend. Despite his confirmed alibi, the police were hesitant to clear him of suspicion. They continued to scrutinize him, making late-night calls to him and his parents, requesting that he travel to a nearby city for further questioning, DNA sampling, or a polygraph test. Notably, it was Tara's boyfriend who was tasked with identifying her body. He had been living in another city but promptly arrived in Athens upon learning of the fire, even though Tara's parents were already present in town. When the police asked the boyfriend to identify the body, they took him to the house but did not let him enter. A police officer went inside, took a photo of the body, and showed it to the boyfriend on the camera screen. The boyfriend was shocked and said he could not be certain if it was Tara. He mentioned that he had given her earrings, and if he saw them, he would know for sure. The officer went back inside, removed the earrings from the body, and showed them to the boyfriend. Only after seeing the earrings did the boyfriend confirm that the body was Tara's. The police then focused on another man, a student in Tara's classes with a troubling reputation. Several female students came forward and reported that this individual would often ask girls out on dates and not accept no as an answer. He had also asked Tara out multiple times, despite knowing she had a boyfriend. Some girls reported that he exhibited creepy behavior, making them feel uneasy. Despite investigating this person, detectives couldn't find any evidence connecting him to the crime. In a contentious move, they even asked Tara's friends to monitor him, but it yielded no results. Investigators also considered another suspect, an attorney at Tara's workplace. They discovered that just before the murder, he began acting strangely. This attorney had been part of a close-knit group of colleagues who regularly socialized outside of work. But he abruptly stopped participating in their gatherings. Moreover, just days before the incident, he had informed Tara that he would be unable to attend her birthday celebration, which was set to take place the day after the murder. On January 19th, before the fire began, one of Tara's colleagues attempted to persuade him to change his mind and attend the celebration, as Tara valued their friendship and was hurt by his sudden refusal. The colleague visited his office but found him absent, which was unusual given that his workday had already started. He was typically present in the office during morning hours, but not on that particular day. The colleague also checked his schedule, wondering if he had meetings, but it was empty. He failed to show up to work that day, but the following day, he visited another colleague's house and acted strangely. Many people who knew the attorney suspected he regularly used illicit substances, which may have contributed to his erratic behavior. However, another detail raised more suspicion. His colleague noticed several fresh scratches on his neck. It was previously discovered that skin particles from the perpetrator were found under Tara's nails, indicating she likely scratched her attacker. The attorney claimed the scratches on his neck came from a cat and denied any involvement in Tara's murder. His behavior became even more bizarre when asked who he thought committed the crime. He suddenly became agitated, shouting that it was Tara's father, but failed to provide any explanation or evidence to support this accusation. A further unusual circumstance was the sudden resignation of the attorney a few months after the murder, followed by his departure from the state. It remains unclear if the police ever compared his DNA to the samples found under the victim's fingernails or if these samples were even analyzed. As with other aspects of the investigation, the detectives did not disclose any information, not even to Tara's family. Subsequent police findings revealed that the attorney had been discreetly involved with 2 female colleagues from his workplace, despite the fact that he got married. This discovery could potentially explain his peculiar behavior and unexplained absences from work. Additionally, both women claimed they were certain he was using illegal substances. Police found no evidence linking the lawyer to the murder, clearing him as a suspect. A maintenance company with access to a spare key was also questioned, but yielded no results. The case has seen little progress, with authorities keeping investigation details confidential to avoid impeding progress. Over time, several potential leads emerged in the case. A witness came forward claiming to have seen an African-American man outside Tara's house a few hours before the fire. Another person mentioned noticing blood on a notebook belonging to one of Tara's university classmates shortly after the murder. Despite investigating these leads, police were unable to make any progress. Tara's parents offered a $77,000 reward for any information that could help solve the case. However, as the years passed, the team of detectives working on the case changed multiple times, and the new investigators were unable to crack the case. The primary challenge was the lack of evidence, as the fire and the subsequent actions of the firefighters destroyed nearly all potential evidence in Tara's room. In 2019, a podcast covering Tara's 19-year-old murder case was released, bringing together her family, key individuals, and all known information about the crime. This sparked renewed interest and caught the attention of the police department, who began communicating more with Tara's family. As a result, the police re-examined the case, although no new breakthroughs were made. The podcast continued to cover Tara's story for 2 years, ultimately having a substantial impact on the case's progression. The Georgia government introduced a bill to reduce the number of unsolved cases in the state, partly due to Tara's case. The bill was named after Tara and Rhonda Coleman, an 18-year-old woman from Georgia who was murdered in 1990 and whose killer remains unknown. Although the 2 murders are unrelated, the initiative was called the Coleman-Baker Bill. In 2023, the bill passed unanimously, and the governor signed it in Athens, accompanied by the families of both victims. The law created a special unit within the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to focus on unsolved cases. It also gave victims' families the right to ask police to re-examine these cases and take new steps to solve them. After the law passed in 2023, a unit was formed to investigate Tara's murder. Detectives re-reviewed all available information and re-examined the limited evidence using modern DNA analysis. This process took several months until a breakthrough was announced at a press conference on May 13, 2024. After 23 years, police revealed that the perpetrator had been caught. The culprit was identified as 48-year-old Edric Lamont Faust. Investigators did not reveal the exact methods used to identify him, but stated that advanced DNA analysis and biological evidence were crucial in the process. To avoid compromising the ongoing legal case, they withheld specific details, which will be disclosed during the trial. The arrest documents listed multiple charges against Edric, including assault, which may have allowed for a DNA match. Additionally, skin cells found under the victim's nails may have been analyzed using modern tools to extract the killer's DNA. As for Edric, his extensive criminal record, which included numerous arrests for various offenses, should have put him in the FBI database long ago. At the time of Tara's murder, Edric was 25 years old and lived in the same city as the victim. However, the police found no evidence to suggest that Edric knew Tara, leading them to believe he may have broken into her home or tricked her into letting him in. Edric was not a suspect in the case until a few days before his arrest, when new DNA analysis methods brought him to the attention of detectives. He is currently in jail awaiting trial. The evidence the police have against him will be revealed during the trial process. The fact that Edric was denied bail suggests that the detectives have obtained conclusive DNA evidence. The police are certain that Edric is responsible for Tara's murder, and as a result, her case is now officially closed. There is currently no verdict for Edric. He was charged with 1 count of premeditated murder, 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of burglary, 2 counts of aggravated sodomy, 1 count of rape, 1 count of aggravated assault, first-degree arson and possession of a knife during the commission of a felony. Tara's family finally has closure after 23 years of searching for the truth. They expressed gratitude to the new team of detectives who helped solve her case. In contrast, Rhonda Coleman's case, which the law is also named after, remains unsolved. However, her family may now feel hopeful that new evidence will be uncovered and justice will be served, just like in Tara's case. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Els van Doren. Els van Doren is a 38-year-old Belgian woman married to a jeweler in Antwerp named Jan de Wilde. They has 2 children, Vincent de Wilde and Carol de Wilde. Although she works in the family jewelry store, Elsa's real passion is skydiving. Els began skydiving with her husband in 1994. Gradually, her passion for skydiving grew rapidly over time. With over 2,300 jumps under her belt, she became an experienced skydiver. She devoted most of her weekends and holidays to the sport. In 1998, Els began skydiving in formation, and 3 years later, in 2001, she became a member of an all-female skydiving team called the Divas. The team competed in the 2003 World Parachute Championships, but Els was forced to leave the team in 2004 due to health problems stemming from a persistent hernia. After recovering, she turned to parachuting as a recreational activity instead of continuing to compete professionally. He became a member of the Swartberg Parachute Club, and by 2006, her jump total had exceeded 2,300. In the Parachute Club, she formed a close friendship with a fellow parachutist and schoolteacher, a 26-year-old named Els Klotmans. To differentiate between the two of them within the club, Els van Doren suggested calling Els Klotmans by the nickname Babs. They both learned to parachute under the guidance of Marcel Summers, another club member who knew both women. The trio developed a deep friendship and even became companions on their skydiving adventures. However, over time, Els found herself growing attached to Marcel, despite her husband. Their friendship gradually developed into a romantic relationship. Since her family was accustomed to her being away on weekends for the skydiving club, they did not suspect anything regarding her relationship with Marcel. Indeed, they often went to Marcel's apartment on weekends and stayed together without worries. Unbeknownst to Els and Babs, they not only shared the same name but also loved the same man. Marcel secretly maintained romantic relationships with both women. To keep the two relationships balanced, Marcel created a schedule. He devoted Fridays to Babs and Saturdays to Els. This arrangement initially worked to Marcel's advantage. However, it did not last long due to an unexpected event that occurred one particular weekend. On the evening of Friday, November 10, 2006, Babs went to Marcel's house as she did every week. At that time, she was unaware that Els had planned to surprise Marcel with an unexpected visit that night. Babs and Marcel had dinner together, and then they returned to Marcel's apartment. There, they found Els waiting outside the door. The content of their conversation is unknown, but it is certain that Babs did not sleep in the same bed as Marcel that night. Instead, Babs slept in a sleeping bag on the living room floor, while Els and Marcel went into the bedroom. In the living room, Babs discovered Elsa's parachute lying next to the other parachute equipment. She felt deeply hurt and betrayed that her friend had deceived and replaced her. These pent-up emotions pushed Babs to the point of committing a reckless act, leading to tragic consequences that no one could have foreseen. Then, on November 18, 2006, 12 members of the skydiving club, including Els, Babs, and Marcel, boarded a flight over Flanders. The plan was for Els, Babs, Marcel, and another skydiver named Tom to jump in a four-person formation at an altitude of 13,000 feet. In this formation, they would link arms before releasing and deploying their parachutes. As they prepared to jump, Els, Marcel, and Tom exited the plane as planned. However, it appears that Babs, perhaps due to a delay or on purpose, jumped a little later than the others. During the free fall, Babs was unable to catch up with the group. At 9,000 feet, Marcel, Els, and Tom broke formation, preparing to deploy their parachutes safely. At this point, it was clear that something serious had occurred, as Els tried to deploy her parachute by pulling the cord, but it refused to open. Trying to stay calm, she recalled the emergency procedures from her training. Having encountered a failed parachute before, she had successfully deployed her backup parachute on that occasion. However, in this case, hurtling through free fall at around 200 kilometers per hour, she had only 20 seconds or less to make a life-saving maneuver and land successfully. Despite her efforts, pulling the backup cord proved futile, and the parachute still did not respond. As her desperation grew, she continued to pull on both the main and backup parachutes, but there was no response. Marcel, who was at an altitude of 800 meters, observed Els, who was only 500 meters above the ground, and sensed that something was wrong because her parachute had not yet deployed. However, he could do nothing but watch the horrifying scene unfold. In a last desperate attempt, Els tried to untangle her parachute cord, hoping to activate it, but her fate was sealed. Meanwhile, in the town of Upabbeek, as these events unfolded, a woman was hanging her clothes out in her garden. A loud noise suddenly made her panic. Looking up, she witnessed a woman swooping down from the sky with a parachute aimed toward her garden. This sight was not unusual, as her residence was only a few kilometers away from the parachute club and its landing site. When she turned back to continue her laundry, the woman discovered a white cloth caught in the top of her bush. Moving closer, she saw a figure lying in the bushes. She quickly called her husband, who was also in the garden doing maintenance, and they contacted emergency services. It was Els, whom they assumed was one of the parachutists, but unfortunately, she showed no signs of life. Marcel, on the other hand, had found a safe landing spot, frantically calling for Els and trying to locate her. Spotting an ambulance, he gave chase, following it to the NEA RBY location where Els had landed. When he lunged toward her, he had to be restrained to allow the rescue team to approach. When the emergency services arrived, resuscitation efforts were made, but to no avail. Els was dead. Marcel insisted on keeping Elsa's parachute intact, stating that it was unusual that neither the main nor the backup parachute had opened. He then contacted her husband, Jan, to deliver the bad news. Jan rushed to his wife's side while Tom returned to the club to relay the sad news of Elsa's death to the other members. When news of Elsa's death was revealed, Babs, feeling overwhelmed, fell to her knees and cried bitterly. Elsa's husband, Jan, arrived at the club to collect her belongings and met Babs, who offered to help him retrieve Elsa's belongings. He observed her seemingly motionless and noticed a strange smile on her face. At that moment, Babs headed toward the dressing room, with Jan following closely behind. However, upon arriving, Babs abruptly slammed the door, locking Jan out. He recounted that it took Babs quite a while before she finally emerged with Elsa's belongings. Meanwhile, at the scene of the accident, police recovered Elsa's parachute and helmet, which was equipped with a video camera that recorded her fateful jump. An autopsy conducted to determine her condition but found no traces of alcohol or drugs that could have impaired her functioning. Her death was classified as either homicide or suicide, believed to have been caused by multiple fractures and internal bleeding from the impact of the fall. Elsa's family suspected that she might have been murdered by someone in her paragliding club who knew how parachutes worked. After the police revealed that Els had been having an affair with Marcel Summers for more than 5 years, the family's grief intensified. Jan was particularly hurt when he learned that other club members, some of whom he considered friends, also knew about the relationship. Additionally, Els had provided false information to her club friends, claiming that she was divorced from her husband. Her funeral took place just 1 day before her daughter Carol's 15th birthday. During the solemn ceremony, Carol was moved to share a heartfelt message. She recalled the family's constant advice to her mother to stop parachuting. Through her story, Carol clearly expressed how much her family missed her mother. She ended her speech by acknowledging her mother's desire for privacy and emphasizing that she would not have been happy to give up her hobby. After the funeral, the police launched an investigation due to growing concerns about the failure of Elsa's backup parachute. A parachuting expert familiar with parachute mechanics was called in to examine Elsa's parachute for any flaws or irregularities. The experts quickly discovered that a crucial component was missing: the pilot's parachute, a vital part of the system. The pilot's parachute plays a key role in deploying both the main and backup parachutes. The examination revealed that her parachute had been deliberately detached, suggesting outside interference. In addition, there were clear signs of tampering, notably with the main parachute, which the pilot was responsible for deploying, and one of the slings connected to the emergency parachute. When reviewing the final body camera footage of Elsa's jump, a striking detail emerged: an unidentified piece of red fabric hovering in front of her that was not part of Elsa's parachute equipment. Investigators are having trouble determining the origin of the red object, so they asked residents of UPAB to thoroughly check their gardens and the surrounding area. If they find the object, investigators advise them to handle it with care, as it may contain DNA from the person who sabotaged Elsa's parachute. Unfortunately, people were unable to locate this important piece of evidence. After Elsa's tragic death, an unexpected event occurred on Monday. Babs found the pilot's parachute. Babs reported that she discovered the parachute when returning from Marcel's apartment and that it had been stuck in a tree along the path between UPAB and Genk. Rather than contacting the police directly, Babs chose to inform Marcel of her discovery. Upon hearing this, Marcel called the police, who quickly arrived at the scene. When the police arrived, they found Babs anxious, confused, and clearly affected by the incident. However, they were skeptical of her story when she claimed that she had discovered the parachute by accident. She explained that it was a complete coincidence and that she had simply decided to take a different route home that day instead of her usual path. According to her account, while stuck behind a slow-moving tractor, she looked up and saw a parachute hovering about 20 meters above the ground, which made her think it might be a sign from the heavens from Els. However, the police were doubtful of this story, as only the investigators knew that the parachute was missing at the time. Meanwhile, the main suspects in Elsa's murder included her husband Jan, her lover Marcel, and her friend Babs. The police searched Marcel's house and concluded that he was not a suspect. They also ruled out Elsa's husband from the list of suspects. Next, the police expanded their investigation to Babs's house, where they seized many items, including Elsa's phone, laptop, and personal diary. These diaries had been recommended by a psychiatrist for Els to record her feelings. Babs was then asked to come to the police station for questioning to gather more information about her relationship with Marcel and Els, as well as to clarify the events leading up to Elsa's death. During questioning, Babs firmly denied any involvement in the destruction of Elsa's belongings. Instead, she attempted to blame Marcel, claiming that he had kept Elsa's belongings while she was at their home the previous weekend. She also accused Jan of keeping Elsa's belongings during the week. After the questioning, Babs was really asked and allowed to return home. However, a second questioning was scheduled for December 20th, 2006, but Babs did not show up. Subsequent investigations revealed that she had attempted to end her own life early that morning. After taking an overdose of sleeping pills and antidepressants, she became unresponsive. Her mother rushed her to the hospital for emergency treatment. In letters written before the act, she shared with loved ones the pain of losing her best friend and the overwhelming stress of being considered the prime suspect in the murder. Babs was then admitted to a psychiatric facility for observation and treatment for 15 days. Having long been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and depression, this was not the first time she had attempted to harm herself. Marcel believed she was merely trying to get attention and had severed ties with her. He thought her self-harm was a ploy to distract from her role in Elsa's death, rather than a genuine desire to end her life. Elle suspected she had taken medication just before her mother returned home to create a dramatic situation. He believed the police were closing in on her and that they would arrest her once they uncovered her lies. At that time, while she was receiving psychiatric treatment, Babs was arrested on January 11, 2007, on suspicion of murder. On January 19, 2007, she appeared in court and was subsequently remanded in custody while the investigation was ongoing. Babs refused to take a polygraph test despite being asked to do so. Further investigation into Els van Doren's parachute equipment revealed that the parachute cord had been deliberately cut with scissors. Based on the cut marks, it was determined that the person who cut the parachute cord was probably right-handed. By March 2007, Babs had been detained for 3 months and had undergone extensive interrogation. Despite the intense pressure, she refused to admit her guilt. During the interrogation, Babs confessed to sending an anonymous letter to Els, in which she acknowledged that her actions towards Elsa's family were wrong. However, this letter was misunderstood by Jan, who thought it was merely a criticism of Elsa's frequent absences due to her passion for parachuting. He discarded the letter without taking it seriously, but it was actually a warning that Babs intended to send to Els to end her relationship with Marcel. Additionally, Babs admitted to calling Marcel anonymously at a time when he was with Els, intending to intimidate them both. Investigators closely examined Babs's automatic activation device. Upon examination, they noticed that she jumped later than the other members of the group. However, her parachute activated earlier, allowing her to observe the events that followed from above. This strategic move also enabled her to locate Elsa's parachute, which she could retrieve later. In September 2008, Babs's lawyers successfully secured her bail, and although the case was still under investigation, she continued to work at the school. Babs's murder trial began on September 24, 2010. During the trial, the prosecution expressed confidence in the evidence they had gathered and believed there was sufficient evidence to charge her with murder. The defense argued that the murder was motivated by Babs's jealousy over her lover's relationship with her best friend. Babs had previously confessed to investigators that she knew she was second to Els in Marcel's eyes. She admitted that Marcel liked Els more than he liked her, which made her feel inferior. The prosecution suggested that her desire to eliminate her rival and remove Els from the relationship provided a plausible motive for the murder. Babs's defense attorney argued that the prosecution based their case only on circumstantial evidence and unproven claims. In her testimony, Clarence stated that she did not see a future with Marcel and that her intimacy with him was a result of her low self-esteem. She also tried to imply that Carol, Elsa's doll, Gaida might have wanted to get back at her mother for being absent most weekends. Despite her sincere efforts to persuade the jury and shift blame, the jury's verdict remained the same. On October 20, 2010, Babs, whose real name was Els Klotmans, was convicted of murdering her friend, Els van Doren, and sentenced to 30 years in prison. She later appealed, arguing that the police had questioned her without her lawyer present. In May 2011, her appeal was denied. However, in June 2022, after a third appeal and serving 12 years and 6 months, Els Clarence was granted conditional release from prison and is now free. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Donald Albin Blom. Donald Albin Blom was born in Minnesota on February 5, 1949. He was an American. Donald's early life was difficult, as he experienced frequent physical and emotional abuse from his father starting at a young age, which continued until his teenage years. At that time, Donald was drinking a lot of alcohol and showing signs of behavioral disorders. His behavioral issues escalated as he entered puberty. His actions also became more erratic. For example, he frequently skipped classes during his time at reform school in 10th grade. On May 26, 1999, a night shift clerk, Katie Poirier, was working alone at a convenience store located within a service station. After midnight, a customer called the police to report that the clerk had disappeared. Upon their arrival, police officers found the store to be empty. A review of the store's surveillance video revealed a large man leading Katie out by her neck around 11:11 and 40 seconds p.m. He was wearing jeans, a backwards baseball cap, and a New York Yankees jersey with the number 23 on the back. Katie appeared to have been forced out of the store. Police questioned Catherine Hannock, an employee at the nearby Subway restaurant, in connection with the incident. She reported seeing a man behaving suspiciously shortly before the Subway closed around 10 p.m. After closing, she drove home and coincidentally encountered the same man driving away from the area. Catherine described the man's vehicle as a black Ford F-150 pickup truck with an extended cab and white markings on the side. She observed the truck circling the maintenance area several times before entering Moose Lake and stopping in the parking lot of a local cafe. Notably, Katie's car was still in the parking lot when Catherine left work. A composite sketch of the kidnapper was created based on that customer description and partial surveillance footage. The sketch depicted a man with long blonde hair, approximately 25 years old. This image was then broadcast on local television and published in newspapers, along with a plea for information from the public. As investigators gathered clues, hundreds of volunteers from around the state converged on the wooded area surrounding the station to search for Katie Poirier. Despite the use of service dogs and helicopters, no signs of her were found. Posters of the missing girl flooded local newspapers and billboards, making it a highly publicized case. Meanwhile, authorities checked in the nearby sex offender facility. Upon verifying that all inmates were present at the time of the incident, police focused on tracking down the suspect's vehicle using its license plate number. They found the owner of that car, which belonged to Donald Blom, but unfortunately, his truck was a different color than the one they were looking for. On June 6, 1999, the official search for Katie was terminated without success. However, many volunteers did not give up hope and continued looking. They believe there will be someone with information that will help the investigation. The fact that the abduction occurred in a store with a security camera led investigators to question whether the perpetrator was foolishly reckless or remarkably bold in carrying out their actions. Although the case remains unsolved, searchers continue to hold out hope that the perpetrator will eventually make another mistake that will lead to their capture. The search team narrowed their investigation to the neighborhood, as the perpetrator seemed to be familiar with the area. Given the possibility that the perpetrator visited the store multiple times before the crime, it's likely that someone in the neighborhood had seen him previously. A search headquarters was established at the Lutheran Church in Moose Lake, where staff members processed leads and volunteers distributed flyers with Katie's description. Maps on the wall highlighted areas already searched, marked with large crosses. Despite these extensive efforts, Katie remained missing. A new theory emerged, suggesting that the kidnapper might be a sports enthusiast, possibly a fan of the New York Yankees. And the police enlisted the help of a sports figure to aid in the search. Unfortunately, after 2 weeks, there were still no developments. The police Minnesota enlisted the help of Paul Molitor, Minnesota Twins legend, to create a public service announcement. The announcement reached a wide audience across the state, including Darryl Brown, an employee at the Minnesota Veterans Home. Darryl recognized a coworker, Donald Hutchinson, who matched the suspect's description and had recently been acting suspiciously. Donald Hutchinson had stopped driving his black pickup truck, had been absent from work the day after the abduction, and had recently gotten a haircut. As investigators looked into Donald Hutchinson, they discovered that his real name was Donald Blom. Further investigation revealed that he owned a black pickup truck hidden in his garage, as well as owned a plot of land near the location where Katie was last seen in Moose Lake. It was also discovered that he had a history of sex crimes, including the kidnapping of young girls, similar to Katie. With this information, detectives quickly obtained a search warrant. Detectives then tracked down Donald, finding him with his family at a campground 140 miles from Richfield. Early one morning, law enforcement agents arrived at Donald's residence to ask him questions. Following a thorough inspection, it was discovered that Donald had purchased a plot of land in Moose Lake about 2 years prior. His neighbors confirmed that he had visited the property frequently before Katie's disappearance, but not then. Donald's supervisor at the veteran home where he worked stated that he was unaware of Donald's past convictions because Donald used a different name, Donald Hutchinson, at work. The supervisor added that Donald kept to himself and didn't socialize much. After his arrest, Donald Blom was initially cooperative and friendly, but he later refused to testify and requested a lawyer. During this time, authorities conducted several searches. Although numerous items were seized from Donald's residence, but officials refused to disclose what they were or how they related to the investigation. A second search was carried out on Donald's 20-acre property in Moose Lake, with over 100 National Guard members and several hundred volunteers participating. The search party trekked several miles into the woods surrounding Donald's property, but were forced to stop as night fell. The search resumed the next morning, and Katie's mother expressed her optimism that her daughter would be found alive. While some held on to the hope that Katie was being held against her will, the sheriff was less hopeful. On the second day of the search, investigators have found an important clue. Bone fragments were found in the ashes of a fire pit on Donald's property. They sent the remains to a lab for further analysis. The lab results shocked everyone. The remains were identified as bone fragments. A tooth found in the ashes was sent to dental specialists for examination. Certified forensic dentist, Dr. Norlander conducted a thorough examination of the tooth. However, she knew that any DNA in the tooth's pulp would have been destroyed due to the conditions under which it was extracted. As a result, she had to use alternative methods. During her examination, Dr. Norlander discovered something that resembled a dental filling. This finding confirmed that the tooth was human and allowed her to investigate whether it could have belonged to Katie. Dental fillings consist of two components, an organic matrix and an inorganic filler. When exposed to heat, the organic matrix burns away, leaving behind particles of the inorganic filler. The analyst can identify a specific brand or group of brands based on the type of filling used. Manufacturers use various types of fillers, up to 50 different kinds, which are easily visible on dental X-rays. A comparison was made between the filling found in the tooth from Donald's fire pit and those used for Katie, revealing a matching composition. Furthermore, researchers determined that it was a specific tooth, number 18, belonging to a young woman. Given the similarities, it was highly likely that the tooth belonged to Katie rather than someone else. A crucial question still needs to be addressed. Why was the perpetrator released from prison despite having kidnapped 7 girls? A more effective justice system may have prevented Katie's tragic fate. Instead, the perpetrator, Donald, changed his name and assumed a new identity, hiding his dark past and continuing to cause harm. In Katie Poirier's case, Donald was charged with kidnapping and illegal possession of a weapon, a federal offense. Initially, he rejected a plea agreement, but later changed his mind and agreed to testify under the condition that he be allowed to call home. On September 8, Donald made a 2.5-hour confession. According to his testimony, on May 26, 1999, he went fishing and returned home to Richfield. However, he later drove back to his Moose Lake home, stopping to buy liquor and have a beer at a bar along the way. It was there that he saw Katie, grabbed her, and forced her into his pickup truck without knowing her. Donald then drove Katie to his motor home. He explained that he didn't fully understand his motivations for the actions he took, but stated that he strangled Katie from behind, which lasted approximately 20 minutes. He denied committing any other assault. After confirming she was dead, he positioned her body in a fetal position in a fire pit and used wood and paper in an attempt to burn the remains. However, his testimony conflicted with the video camera footage and evidence found in the burn pit. Specifically, Donald claimed Katie repeatedly asked him to release her, but she didn't struggle until he began choking her. He asserted that he used only his bare hands to kill her. Furthermore, his claim of using wood and paper to burn the remains to ashes was considered unfeasible. Wood and paper alone could not have reached a high enough temperature to turn a human body to ashes. When questioned further, Blom acknowledged that his actions didn't make sense, and he was unable to provide a clear motive for his actions. After the interview, Donald contacted 2 local television stations to inform them of his actions and request that they leave his family in peace. The plea deal also included the return of several properties to his wife Amy Blom, including a plot of land, their home in Richfield, and the family vehicle. However, the news of Donald's confession was extremely distressing for the Katie family, who had held on to the hope that she was still alive. Donald asserts that he killed and cremated Katie on impulse, without any clear motive. But soon, Donald retracted his testimony, saying that his initial confession was false and induced by the pressures of solitary confinement and medication he was taking at the time. According to Donald, the isolation and medication caused him to hallucinate, leading him to believe that confessing would be the only way out of his situation. Donald then stated that he didn't know what he was saying. As a result, the initial plea deal was cancelled, and lawyers for both sides began preparing for the trial. Donald Blom's trial began in June 2000 and jury selection took 5 weeks to complete. The trial then lasted for another 5 weeks, with over 50 witnesses, including several key ones, testifying. Carlton County Assistant Prosecuting Attorney Thomas Perler opened the case. Among the early witnesses was Donald's own brother, who revealed that he had given their family a box of used clothes, including a New York Yankees jersey. This contradicted Donald's previous statement that he had never owned such a shirt. 2 women who were kidnapped by Donald in 1983 also testified, describing his behavior towards them. The jury gained further insight into Donald's motives when they realized that 2 young girls that he kidnapped bore a resemblance to Katie. Furthermore, forensic experts analyzed a partial tooth found at the scene and confirmed that it matched Katie's age, gender, and dental records. Doctor and Norlander initially questioned whether the object was a tooth, but after conducting further tests, she testified in court with a reasonable degree of medical certainty that the tooth belonged to Katie's. Her conclusion was largely based on the discovery of specific chemicals in the filling material. Additional evidence against Donald included a surveillance video from another store, taken in May, which showed him with blonde tips in the time of the kidnapping. This detail was confirmed by his barber and made him appear younger. The most crucial piece of evidence emerged when Donald confessed and the judge permitted Donald's statement to be considered as part of the case. As this evidence was presented, the courtroom fell silent, except for the quiet sobbing of Katie's relatives. It seemed clear that the evidence against Donald was mounting. Rodney Broden, the lead defense attorney, began calling witnesses on August 7th. The first witness he called was Amy Blom. Amy testified that her husband was at home on the night Katie disappeared. Amy remembered this detail because she was concerned that her husband's criminal record might make him a suspect. Later, she recalled the specifics of Donald's whereabouts that night. He had returned home around 9:30 p.m. and they had already gone to bed. When she woke up the next morning, she found that he had already made coffee, further confirming that he was at home. Amy further testified that she was treated poorly by the police during their questioning. She alleged that they threatened to take her children away from her if she did not answer their questions as they wanted. Amy described their behavior as bullying and stated, "They called she a liar." During the trial, Amy testified that she had never seen Donald's brother give Donald a baseball jersey, and he had never worn one, as far as she knew. Meanwhile, Donald was visibly emotional, crying and wiping away tears. When Donald took the stand to defend himself, he denied kidnapping Katie Poirier under oath. However, he had previously admitted to the crime during the investigation. During his testimony, which lasted over 3 hours, Donald exhibited emotional turmoil, frequently speaking and crying. He claimed that his life was unraveling and that he felt unwell around the time of the crime. Donald also mentioned that his wife, Amy, was considering leaving him due to the media attention. This led Donald to try a new tactic. In an attempt to gain the jury's sympathy and ultimately secure his release from jail, he portrayed himself as the victim. Although he initially confessed to the crime, he later took back his statement. Donald changed his story, claiming that he was at home with his wife, who had previously testified to the same, on the night of the crime, despite having gone fishing at Moose Lake earlier. He arrived home before 10 p.m. well before the time Katie was taken. During cross-examination, Donald was forced to confront the inconsistencies in his initial statements to the police. His appearance in court ultimately did not help his case. Donald came across to many as someone who complained excessively and was trying to avoid taking responsibility for his actions. After the questioning concluded, Donald Blom appeared frustrated. He turned to the judge, uttered a profanity, and requested permission to make a single statement, but was denied. Then, the case went to the jury, who deliberated for 10 hours, 3 of which spent reviewing the taped confessions. Ultimately, they returned a guilty verdict, and Donald Blom was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Donald Blom maintained that his case was not hopeless and was confident that he would eventually be cleared of the charges. He strongly denied any involvement in the crime, insisting that he had not killed anyone. Despite his conviction, he believed he had a solid foundation for an appeal, but the appeals court ultimately upheld his conviction in a lengthy 81-page ruling issued in 2004. Although his trial was imperfect, the judges concluded that it had been fundamentally fair, and therefore saw no justification for overturning the conviction or ordering a new trial. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Courtney Holden. Courtney Holden was born on February 28, 1992. When she was 2 years old, she was sent to an orphanage. Life there was not happy, not only for Courtney but for all the other children. Every day at the orphanage began with a prayer. Children of all ages prayed to the Almighty to give them a family and a happy life. Finally, Courtney's dream came true when she was adopted by the Holden family. Courtney arrived in Spokane at the age of 4 and began living in the Holden family home with Joshua and some other foster children. However, instead of finding a loving family as she had hoped, her life here was worse than at the orphanage. What Courtney experienced at the Holden home could only be described as a real nightmare. From a young age, she was forced to do all the housework. She had to clean the whole house and wash the dishes after every meal for the entire family. If she made a mistake, she was punished. Surprisingly, the Holden family treated the other foster children better. No one understood why they disliked her so much. Judy Holden was old when she adopted Courtney, and she was the last child they had received from the orphanage. Perhaps this explains their inexplicable cruelty and hatred towards Courtney. She was forbidden to go out without permission and was often abused. Visitors to the house often heard Judy and Joshua calling Courtney Cinderella, as if she were in a fairy tale, but in reality, she was more like a slave to her cruel stepmother and siblings. Courtney was very sensitive and had become accustomed to a difficult life with the Holden family. She feared her foster mother and felt terrified just seeing her brother Joshua. He did not allow her to communicate with her friends. She was not allowed to use a cell phone or other modern devices. She was only allowed to leave the house when necessary and always had to ask for permission. She only enjoyed fresh air and chatted with her neighbors when she was alone in the backyard. However, she became accustomed to this life and did not feel bitter. She still respected her adoptive parents because they were the only family she knew, and she had no concept of a normal family. Courtney experienced a period of freedom when Joshua, due to conflicts with their parents, moved in with his sister for an extended time. For Courtney, this was the happiest period of her life. She finally experienced the freedom she had always longed for, allowing her to go out, walk around, and meet friends. After finishing school, Courtney fell in love for the first time. Michael was an ideal partner. She felt the care and attention from him that she had never received from anyone else. Every time she met Michael, Courtney felt extremely happy. Their relationship lasted until 2011, when they had a son. Michael was eager for Courtney to move in with him to create a complete family. However, for unknown reasons, Courtney refused this offer. She continued to live in a Holden household, which she did not like, and ended her relationship with Michael. After the Holden family went through many changes, their home became deserted. The adopted children grew up and left, and John Holden, Courtney's adoptive father, was passed away. For a while, Courtney lived with her adoptive mother, Judy, and sometimes her son Joshua was allowed to visit with Judy's permission. Their life was quite peaceful when Joshua, Courtney's brother, was away. However, after their father died in 2014, Joshua returned and began causing trouble for the family. He installed many surveillance cameras around the house on Hero Avenue, near Rogers High School in Northeast Spokane. Signs that said, "Smile, you're being watched," were placed all over the yard, with cameras pointing in many directions. This made Courtney nervous because she knew that going out would get her in trouble with Joshua. Courtney's life once again became difficult and uncertain. Around 2015, Courtney revealed to a neighbor that she was again deprived of her right to use a cell phone, manage her social media accounts, communicate with people outside the family, drive, or leave the house without Joshua's permission. After Courtney gave birth, Joshua became so bitter that he forced her to cut off all contact with the baby's father. Courtney silently complied. The neighbor noticed bruises on Courtney's face and arms. When asked, she frankly admitted that Joshua hit her. They were worried and did not understand why Courtney would endure such abuse. They tried to help her by reporting it to the police, but the Holden family always tried to suppress the matter. This was partly because Courtney never publicly admitted that she was being threatened by her brother. Eventually, Courtney was forbidden to talk to neighbors and was only allowed to go out at night. She silently complied. Courtney knew Joshua better than anyone. He was a large, overweight man with considerable strength and was often abusive. Friends of Joshua described him as paranoid, ruthless, and unpredictable. He had bragged in public about his ability to easily end a life and dispose of a body without difficulty. He had a notable criminal record. In 2005, he was charged with assault and harassment, but due to lack of evidence and the victim's unwillingness to cooperate with the police, he was released. He was also suspected of assaulting and sexually abusing a woman in 2003 when the perpetrator could not be identified. In 2006, Joshua was arrested for domestic violence against his mother and burglary. These incidents forced him to flee his parents' home for several years. After returning, Joshua became more violent. He kept complete control over Courtney. She largely cut off contact with her friends, saying she was afraid to go out for fear that Joshua would find out and make things worse. A friend kept in touch with Courtney every day on Facebook until Joshua found out. In her last message, nearly 2 years ago, Courtney said, "I have to go. Joshua is coming home soon." After that, her account has since been permanently deleted. Those who know the Holdens say the family's relationship is unusual. They are surprised that Courtney's child calls Jodi mom and Joshua dad, while only calling his biological mother by her first name. This has led some to suspect that Joshua may be the child's biological father. Neighbors and acquaintances have criticized the Holdens' odd lifestyle and antisocial behavior, and have tried to stay away from the house. In August 2018, after an argument, Courtney tried to leave the house with a suitcase of belongings. Her mother, Jodi, yelled at her to go home, but Courtney refused. Joshua forcibly took Courtney back into the house. Jodi closed the door, and Courtney was unable to escape. This was the last time the neighbors, and perhaps anyone outside the family, saw Courtney. After that, she lived a life of isolation from the outside world. It took nearly 2 years for people to start worrying about her disappearance. In October 2019, Michael expressed concern about not seeing her for nearly 2 years. He wanted to see the child, so he reported Courtney missing to the police on October 24th. The police went to search Holden's house and were surprised to find Courtney was not there. Joshua and Jodi refused to cooperate. Jodi only allowed the police to look through Courtney's room and then told them to leave. A search dog was used but found nothing. The Holdens claimed that Courtney had abandoned her child and run away. However, they could not explain who was withdrawing Courtney's Social Security benefits and using her electronic food stamps. On the day the police searched the house, Jodi and Joshua withdrew the remaining $600 from Courtney's bank account. The next day, a woman claiming to be Courtney called the National Crime Information Center, saying she was safe and did not want to be searched. Police traced the call and found that the woman was Courtney's half-sister. Joshua and Jodi later gave conflicting explanations for Courtney's disappearance. They said she ran away with a truck driver and then with a secret lover. Courtney's absence, along with the changing accounts of those who lived with her, made it clear that the Holdens were hiding something. In late October 2019, Joshua and Jodi Holden abruptly left Spokane, leading detectives to suspect they were involved in Courtney's disappearance. They were found in Texas, at the home of one of Jodi's adopted daughters. Authorities were able to charge them with withholding Courtney's welfare and identity theft, leading to their arrest in Texas. In early October, the Spokane Police Department wanted to check on Courtney's status. The case quickly became a missing persons investigation, which was assigned to Major Crimes Detective Randy Lesser. Courtney was officially declared missing. Alerts were sent to all states, and the media picked up the story, triggering a widespread search. When police and detectives went to check on her home, Joshua and Jodi Holden have continued to refuse to cooperate with the investigation. Beside that, Randy told the vet he was worried Courtney might be dead and mentioned he was particularly concerned about Joshua's history of violence. Joshua had been charged with assault in the past, but the case was dismissed when the victim stopped cooperating with prosecutors. Investigators are now gathering DNA evidence and court records from that case, which show Joshua was also suspected in another attack in 2003. Neighbors and family described Joshua as mentally unstable, cruel, and diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. One neighbor revealed that Joshua was unemployed and that Jodi feared him. The neighbor said Joshua and Jodi often bragged about how they had eluded the police. Joshua also claimed that killing and hiding a body was easy. "Especially when you have kids, you can't just disappear," said Detective Randy. Courtney was also described in court records as a devoted mother who never abandoned her children. For more than 18 months, Courtney was confined to her home and was not allowed to leave. Joshua and Jodi gave neighbors and relatives various excuses for her absence, from traveling with her truck driver boyfriend to running away with her fiancé. At one point, they said she was home but not available to receive visitors. When Randy visited their home in early October, Jodi claimed that Courtney had just returned home a few days earlier and was taking a walk with her son. However, when asked for her phone number, Jodi slammed the door. The police then forced her to let them in to check Courtney's room. According to Randy, Jodi appeared very nervous about the situation. According to Randy's court records, the house was extremely messy with items piled everywhere, including on the kitchen counter. Courtney's room was also in disarray, with an empty mattress. Randy commented that it appeared that no one lived there. At one point, Jodi panicked. When Randy asked to check the rest of the house for Courtney's child, Jodi ordered the investigators to leave. Later that day, a neighbor informed Randy that they had seen Joshua, Jodi, and one of Courtney's sisters leave in a truck, along with a child. Detective Randy also became suspicious that Courtney, who suffered from a chronic illness, had not seen a doctor since October 2017. She received her last prescription in July 2017, although she had been taking her medication for months before she disappeared. Despite gaps in her medical records, money continued to be withdrawn from Courtney's bank account each month, and her EBT card was used to purchase groceries. Surveillance footage confirmed Joshua and Jodi shopping with a small child. They was also caught on camera withdrawing the remaining money from Courtney's bank account on the day she was declared missing in early October. On October 24th, Joshua and Jodi left the home. When police arrived to execute a search warrant, Randy noted that they discovered the DVR from the security camera system had been removed, and the family's 6 pets were also missing. By mid-November, Joshua and Jodi's cell phone numbers had been canceled. However, that same day, 2 new phone numbers with Texas area codes were activated on their accounts. About a month after the Holdens moved out, a neighbor called the police to report activity at the house. It was actually one of Jodi's daughters and her husband, who had flown in from Texas to check on the property. They said they hadn't seen Courtney in 2 years and that Jodi was retired. However, there were inconsistencies in their information. The man told the police that Joshua and Jodi had a child, while Jodi's daughter insisted that the child was Courtney's. In mid-December, Randy traveled to Texas to look for Joshua and Jodi. Police found them at Jodi's daughter's house, along with Courtney's son. Joshua and Jodi Holden were arrested on multiple charges: identity theft, interference with child custody, unauthorized use of Courtney's bank account, and concealment of her child. The child was found safe and returned to his father. No other family members have been charged with any crime. Police searched Jodi's home in Spokane with a search dog but found no trace of Courtney. A search of a home in Texas also turned up nothing. Police also searched a car and trailer belonging to Jodi at an RV park in Oklahoma. Joshua, 40, and Jodi, 74, are currently in custody in Texas and have refused to answer police questions. They also refuse to be extradited to Spokane. With insufficient evidence to prove their involvement in Courtney's disappearance, it is likely that Joshua and Jodi will be released. This is perhaps one of the most mysterious disappearances ever. "I have 4 notebooks full of different information," Randy said of the month-long investigation. Jodi and Joshua continue to maintain that they had nothing to do with Courtney's disappearance, while police believe she is likely dead but have unfortunately not been able to prove it. Domestic violence experts point to a number of factors as to why cases like Courtney's are not always reported. One is the societal assumption that someone else will take care of it. According to Morgan Kern, Director of Counseling and Outreach at the YWCA, fear of retaliation can also be a factor. And people sometimes view it as a family issue, something to be dealt with at home. Although Jodi and Joshua have been accused of multiple acts, they have not been charged directly in Courtney's disappearance. However, many still suspect they knew what happened. Joshua not only had a history of aggression but had also claimed to be capable of killing and hiding a body from the police. Investigators believe Courtney is dead, but no suspects have been arrested in the case. To summarize today's story, it is sad that Courtney was victimized by the Holden family. This young woman longed for a loving family but did not have the courage to defend herself. She believed that the people who abused and exploited her were still family. But does a real family need to make you defend yourself like that?